Hello, everyone. We're going to get started in just the next few minutes. If you have any questions as today's event happens, please use the Q&A that you can see in the slides moving in. It'll be at the bottom of your screen. And just so you know, we are recording the session, so any of your questions that we may not get to during this presentation, we'll gather them together and answer them in a follow-up email. So thank you very much for joining us. Go ahead and get comfortable. Refill the coffee cup or whatever you do this time of day, and we'll get started in just a few minutes. Thanks. All right, welcome to the event today. If everyone on our team will open up their videos and unmute themselves and things like that, we'll get started. Liz, we will turn this over to you, and you can introduce this session. Thanks for everyone for joining us today. Our guests are here. Debbie Green and I are going to get started. So Liz, I'll turn this over to you as we get going.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for coming on. This has been amazing. What a great turnout we've had. My name is Liz Bennett, and I work in events and communications at the Chamber. A lot of you know me, but a lot of times I'm behind the scenes. So I don't have my little office anymore to hide in. So we're all kind of evolving as it goes. Just want to say, first of all, that the Chamber is still working really hard for you all, even though we're at home and it's very different. We're working hard behind the scenes to serve members and find the best resources for you all. I know sometimes you feel like there's nothing out there for you, but we are there for you. And so when you can't think of anything else, especially reach out to us and we'll try our best to help. We started talking a few weeks ago about what this landscape would look like. And we met with a couple of members, and this event was kind of born through that. The 4 o'clock focus will just kind of talk about timely events, timely topics that are happening in our world right now. And because we only have a week between them, we can really kind of evolve that into topics that are very needed at that moment. So Bill Dotson of Rocker and Debbie Green of Bringing in the Green are wonderful moderators that are going to help us with this weekly event. And we'll be bringing in Chamber members each week to talk about different topics. And if you all are interested in talking about something, feel free to reach out to me. This first episode is what's next. So basically we're talking about what comes after the isolation period when we start opening back up. What does our new normal look like? And how do we navigate that? So Lyle Hanna of Hanna Resource Group and Leslie Jarvis of Fort Group are generous enough to lead us in this discussion and talk about some tips on what this new landscape looks like. And Debbie and Bill, I'll let you introduce yourselves further and start the discussion.
Great, Liz, thank you. So I'm Debbie Green. I'm owner of Bringing in the Green, and I have a strategic marketing consultant background. So I help a variety of small businesses with their marketing needs, and that is more than ever, important now more than ever, because we have to be so sensitive with our messaging strategies. But I wanted to thank Commerce Lexington for the opportunity to host this and to provide relevant content for business owners and community members over the next few weeks. Our goal is to give you as many best practices as we can, so that when you are bringing people back into the workplace, you're taking lessons learned from both Leslie and Lyle and other experts in the next few weeks, so that you can be as efficient and effective as possible upon reopening. We just don't have any time to waste, and we want to make sure that you guys feel like you have a venue and a forum where you can ask questions and get those answers quickly. So I'd like to thank Bill as well for being my partner in crime, and of course being the technological guru that he is. We will plan on having Leslie and Lyle speak for about 20 minutes. They're going to be going back and forth and sharing human resource best practices. You may know that Lyle Hanna is the founder and president of Hanna Resource Group, and has over 35 years in human resource management. And Leslie Jarvis is the Corporate Human Resources Director for Fort Group, overseeing about 2,500 employees in a variety of industries, and has about, again, similar 25 years of experience in human resources. So these are some really great experts that have had some real-time kind of training, if you will, the last few weeks. And so I'm eager to hear from them. We'll let them talk for the next 15, 20 minutes, and then we'll open it up to some questions. So if you have questions, please make sure that you hand raise and share those, and Bill will be keeping track of that. And then we also had some questions that were asked in advance. So we'll be asking those of Lyle and Leslie as well. So Lyle, turn it over to you.
Great. I'm delighted to be here and share with you experiences that we've had. Leslie and I are going to do this back and forth together. This isn't our first rodeo. We've done this last week on a similar program. And we're going to kick off just by, we've kind of had to condense this down because you cannot cover this all in 20 minutes, let me tell you. We're going to move right along with it. But we're going to start out just giving you a quick list of 10 considerations for return to work. And Bill, are your slides up? Are they up?
I am putting those up right now, so
okay,
everybody
great.
sees that.
Well,
we've even got our first question in already, so this is great. Thank you all for leading in. But I'll turn this back over. So this is the first slide up on the screen for everybody, talking about how communication is key.
All right, so we're going to get to communication in a second. We have another 2 slides, Bill, somewhere there. 10 considerations for return to work plan.
Oh, yes.
Checklist
Yes.
for you guys, right? So I'm going to the first 5 of them are communication to employees. We're going to hit each of these in detail, but just like that's really critical right up front. Then some policy for handling the current new COVID-19 cases. How are you going to do that? You got to have some things written down about that. You got to be prepared to do some internal testing for COVID-19. Now, you're not going to be doing the swabs down the throat right off the bat, but there are other things you can do. You've got to be prepared to do contact tracking and tracing. We'll talk about that for a few minutes. And then get ready for returning employees to work. We'll talk about that. So those are the first 5 things that are really important. Leslie, give them the next 5.
Well, in the next 5, Lyle, we're going to talk about preparing the workplace for distancing and the personal protective equipment that's going to be necessary for that. Looking at a lot of the policies that you have in place, such as your PTO, your travel policy, and then last rebuilding connections. What's this new norm going to look like? And I think this, I want to thank you for the opportunity inviting us to speak on this topic, because if you're following the governor and you reviewed his 10-point plan for returning to work, it covers the very things that we're going to be talking about in this next 20 minutes, including the social distancing and all of the challenges that employers are going to face when they try to get back to that new normal in the workplace.
All right, so let's jump right in and talk about communication is key. Leslie, what would you say about that?
Well, I think communication is the biggest point going through this, and I think that's what I've experienced. Is I think when we all rang in the new year on January 1st, we had no idea that this is what was going to face us in a few months. So I think it's taken everybody or caught everyone off guard. But I think one of the things that I've noticed in employees and managers that I've dealt with on this topic is everyone has a different opinion. And I'm not justifying, explaining any of those opinions, but some people are scared. Some people don't believe that it's true. Some people have strong opinions. Check out Facebook and you'll see all of the strong opinions that people have. But I think what's important from a management's perspective is that your customers, that your employers need to see that you have empathy toward their feelings on this and how they feel about that. And I believe wholeheartedly that how a business approaches this and how management approaches this is going to establish a very serious point to your branding as moving forward. Your employees are watching how you're preparing for this, how you're communicating, how you're going to structure the workplace, those policies. So again, they're taking note of how you're responding and how legitimate you take their concerns or their fears or their anxieties. So I think communication is a big part of this. Lyle, if you want to take it a little further for us.
Absolutely. It is really serious. And employees are going to remember how we reacted during this time when they get back in the workplace later. And we're going to share our best knowledge with you right now. Leslie and I are, but you know what? I've been doing this for 7 weeks now, and it changes every week. And so we're going to give you the best stuff we have right now, but I'd say check with the CDC online and the governor's website. Both those have some great information. So if you need more detail on things we've talked about, go look at those resources because they're really helpful. But here's some quick ideas about communication. You're going to need an ongoing communication plan. Have you established an emergency test? Have you established and tested an emergency communication plan? Because like we have clients that all of a sudden the public found out before they did that there were people with COVID in their workplace. What are you going to do? How are you going to handle that? Who are you going to communicate with? You need to have plans in place already so you're not caught off guard on that. And you can expect it to happen. So, you know, some of it's going to happen. Get ready for it. So that's the outside communication, but you also need this internal communication. Leslie already hit on it some, but you can't overestimate that. It's like, we've got to have a plan to help employees feel confident that we're taking care of them. I work closely with the risk manager from Walmart, and you can imagine the kind of challenges they face. They had one of the first publicly, cases that went public in Kentucky. And they had to go to work to figure out how are we going to respond? What are we going to do? How do we find out what happened? How did this person get in the workplace? Who else have they been exposed to? All that kind of stuff. So we're going to be talking about the new normal. What does the new normal workplace look like? And it's going to include serious and regular communication for sure. Now, what expectations will our employees have and our customers have? Well, the biggest one is they expect us to keep them safe. You can imagine if you send your husband or wife or your daughter or son off to work, you're really hoping that the employer is going to keep things safe. So what does that mean? That means keep the place clean, keep it disinfected, give them the proper equipment they need to stay safe. How frequently should communications occur? This is sort of repeat, but regularly, all the time. Keep communicating, and things will keep changing. So you got to keep giving them that. You're going to be asking, who here has COVID-19? You need to figure that out before they get to work. Not always easy because they don't always know. But there are some things we can do up front that the law under EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and the OFCCP, you couldn't do these things, but now you can take people's temperature at the door. You can ask them questions, but it is important to do that in a way that doesn't cause problems down the road. It has to be made private and so forth. So employees, I'd say the bottom line is they really need to know how serious this is. And here's what I'd say. You engage them and set an example and show them. You show them how to clean. You show them how to keep their own hands clean. You show them how to wear a mask. You give them plenty of masks. We're saying 2 a day that's what a lot of employers we're working with are saying. I give them 2 a day because they might use them, mess them up, get them dirty, whatever, But then we want them to understand that they're partially responsible for the safety of everybody around them. See, that's what helps us be a better society. That's what the governor keeps trying to get us all to realize, is that we're all responsible for each other here. So that communication is really, really important. And our next slide has to do with the new workplace. We've hit on it a little bit, but the new workplace, that's all about kind of what is this new normal? And Leslie, I know you're working at it. Now, she didn't say this at first, but Leslie has people in nursing homes, the insurance companies, banks. The cool thing about Fort Bank, it is not just one thing. They've got stores, they've got retail, a little bit of everything. So if it's out there, Leslie's seeing it. So Leslie, what about the new normal?
Well, when you start talking about getting your workplace ready, many of the businesses that I assist with have not closed the doors. We may have closed them to the public, but we remained open in some aspects. So we've had to think through this and had to walk through this for a few weeks and look at what that new workplace is going to look like. One of the things that's being stressed over and over is 6 feet apart. Well, some of you may have workplaces such as a call center, or an operations area where people are working in cubicles. And so you're looking at your space right now and you're thinking, how in the world am I going to, one, get these cubicles apart? How am I going to space these individuals 6 feet apart? So there's a lot of things that hopefully you've already started thinking about or started implementing in the workplace. One of the things that I think is very important when we talk about the social distancing is making a path for the traffic. Again, if you work in a large office, maybe you have to put some arrows on the carpet that every traffic flows in one direction, that makes a loop around the office and that you don't go in the opposite direction. So again, you're going to have to really think outside of the box in some ways that you haven't. Restrooms. Now, if you have a restroom that maybe has 3 stalls in it, or maybe you have 2 restrooms for women and 2 restrooms for men, but maybe you need to put a sign on the restroom during this time that it's just a 1-person restroom to limit that social. What is your break room going to look like? I'm a coffee fanatic. So are you going to limit the coffee pot? Are you going to turn access off to that break room, to the refrigerator, to everything that people are going to be that communal property? So again, it's not as simple as just saying, I think we can all stay 6 feet apart, but who's going to be responsible for all of these procedures and making sure they're taking place? And that goes back to something that, Lyle said with communication, and we're going to talk more about that in the policies and procedures, but making sure your employees understand what that new workplace is going to look like, and how it's going to be set up and who's going to be responsible for those things. But again, the workplace is going to look different to us. We're going to have to help our employees understand that new layout and the new way that we're going to have to handle our business going forward.
So let me ask a question.
You think about that personal protective equipment.
All right, Bill's going to throw one out to us first.
So I've got a question about that. In my space, being in the tech world, we can almost always work from wherever we are. How many companies do you think are going to start adopting either flex time or more work from home after this ends, or maybe even right now?
That is so funny, because Leslie and I've gone back and forth on this. Employers have been so surprised, because a lot of them didn't really like that work from home stuff.
No.
More work is getting done, but there are places where things are getting done that weren't done for 9 months before this, and all of a sudden employees are getting it done. Now, it may be because, I don't know how you all are, but I'm working about 18 hours a day, and I hope my employees aren't doing that. We're trying to keep them from doing that, but there are not as many interruptions. We're not going to the coffee stand,
Yeah, and your team. One of the things that's on here, Lyle, your group, Debbie's, mine, we all work with a number of different businesses, and as you mentioned, the Fort group has a number of different businesses. So we're seeing and hearing a lot of things. I'm curious about that new norm. Any sort of health changes inside an organization that you all would see that are coming but not just related to COVID-19, but just in general? Any other changes in that area?
And I'm sorry, did you say health?
Yes, health. Yeah. So, this is the first time you've had, at least in my lifetime, that you've had to have your temperature taken at the door. So hopefully that won't continue, but some other things, cleaning, janitorial equipment, any of those things, are you all seeing changes in that area, or at least preparation for changes in that area?
I think definitely. And I've also seen, and again, we'll talk about management's response to this, but whose job is it? Working in human resources or as management, that's the number one question. It's not my job to do that. Or who's making that assumption of who's going to wipe the doorknob down, who's going to wipe the copy machine off with the disinfectant. So I think it's good hygiene. Or we're starting to have some practices that we thought we learned in kindergarten, but now they're being reinforced on how to wash hands, how to do that, how to create that social distancing and so forth. But I think the workplace is going to change tremendously because of this. And I think it's going to be scary for some. It's technology is scary for me. I taught myself how to use a computer, and I use it every day. But for someone to say, let's Skype, well, that takes on a different challenge. It can be a little intimidating. So I think a lot is changing with the workplace.
Okay.
There's a lot of people are looking at a variety of training, and we're training people on how to do Zoom calls, and people need help with that, So Hey, but if you don't mind, I'll slip into this PPE.
Mm-hmm.
Whoever thought that would be such a big term? Personal protection equipment. We're going to be responsible for making that available to our employees, and that includes masks. Well, how many? I threw out that thing about 2 a day a minute ago, but start adding that up. Somebody called me and said, so how many do I need? Well, how many employees do you need? How many work days are there in the remainder of the year? I mean, they're going to order, 20,000 of those things or something. But even small employers, somebody with 19 was going to order 3,000 of them. That's a lot of masks, But I tell you what, something I just learned today. I just listened to more and more companies are doing those washable ones. Get this, Tempra Sealy right here in Lexington is now in their Medina plant up in Ohio is producing these washable ones. The guy that was going to order 10,000 is ordering 500 because he's going to give people enough to have one a day, and then they can take them home and wash them, like during the week. So I don't know how that's going to work, but people are trying different things. So masks, gloves, gowns, disinfectant, hand disinfectant, wipes, all those things are going to be our responsibility. And we're going to have to kind of train people on how to use those. So a guy at Walmart says, well, a couple things. One, get your managers out showing people how to use it so that people realize they're taking it seriously, okay? Don't let the managers just slip in and out. They need to be a part of it. But then make sure you're doing it according to the directions. Read the directions on there because these things don't work right if you don't use them right. So that's really important. We're going to have to be doing some internal testing so that try to get an infrared scanner right now. Because here's the deal. You know what the governor's plan says? If you're going to reopen, you need to have 14 days of PPE on hand before you reopen. Well, not many people have that, I can tell you. So people are really scampering right now. But if you get to Tempra Sealy fast, you might get them there. Anyway, just for the mask. But other places, they're shipping them in from China, and it takes 3 weeks. So I mentioned the action plan for staff for COVID-19. When you find out you've got people, who knows what tracing and tracking is all about? Okay, so that's going to be our responsibility. If we find out somebody on our team has COVID-19, we've got to figure out who they've been in touch with. And then we've got to make some decisions about those people. What was the contact? Somebody's got to go sit down and talk to these people, or get them on the phone and talk with them. How much contact have you had with this person? And we've had one of these happen this weekend. It turns out 4 people were in the building and one guy we know has it. So we had to go figure out who the other 3 people were. What time were they in the building? Did they ever see the guy? One guy was in the same room with him, not anywhere near him. So that was a nice one. That kind of cleaned up. But I think that's just a little bitty example of what's going on out there. So all that, the PPE and the stuff that goes with it is all going to be important. And this tracking and tracing, absolutely critical. Kind of get a handle on that.
Lyle,
Yes.
Lyle, can I ask you a question on that? We had a pre-question before this that kind of dovetails to what you're saying. Do employees have the right to refuse that information to you? Can they say, I don't want to tell you who I was with, or I don't want to wear a mask? And if so, what are the ramifications, or what can the employer do in response to somebody that doesn't feel comfortable sharing?
Well, great question. Anybody can say no, right? You can do that on the witness stand even, but it's perjury on the witness stand, and it's grounds for firing if you don't answer those questions right.
Okay.
Employment situation. I mean, the CDC has put some of these things as priorities, so you can ask people what their situation is and ask questions that you wouldn't normally ask. But we're talking about life and death here. We can't have our own other employees exposed to it, so it's okay to ask. But here's what I'd say is you don't ask them in public. You don't ask them in front of a bunch of other people. And you might figure out who on your staff is going to do that so that information is kept tight, because you still have a responsibility to be respectful of that person's background and their health situation and not make it public. Okay. So
Great. Thank you so much.
And as a quick point for logistics, because we told everyone we would try to wrap up by 4:45, but I've got a great list of questions that's come in, which I don't know what your all's time frame's like, but these are wonderful questions. So if we get finished by then, great. If not, and you all have the opportunity to extend your time, I'd love to get these questions answered live. So just FYI, it's 4:25. We told people it'd be until about 4:45, but if you've got the time, these questions might take us a little longer.
Okay, my last point is you need to figure out who the high-risk people are in your population. See, that's getting at that same thing, Debbie. These are personal things, right? but you need to take extra special care for those people, you know? And you could say, well, it's just old farts like me, but it's not just that too, you know, there's some more details. So that means what they're saying right now is with those people, try to keep them at telework as long as you can, you know, give them tasks that have minimal contact with people. Don't put them in the high, you know, traffic places, and delay bringing some people back if they have, you know, health issues that could easily make this much worse for them. That's a really personal thing, but you got to give that some consideration. Leslie, you had some things you want to add to this?
I do. One of the things I think is important for all businesses to remember, and sometimes the smaller your business is, I think sometimes we wonder if maybe we're exempt from certain laws. One of the things you have to take into consideration is if you employ one person, you're subject to OSHA guidelines. If you employ 15 people, you're subject to equal pay and some of the other guidelines and parameters. 20 employees, you have to take into consider age discrimination in the workplace. Americans with Disabilities Act, if you're looking at 20 employees. So one thing is you have to be familiar with your size of employer, your employer size, and then what policies and procedures. So when the person comes to you and says, you know, I don't want to wear a mask, I find it uncomfortable. Could that possibly be a very legitimate explanation? Somebody could have asthma, putting a mask on. So then you have to think, how does the Americans with Disabilities Act, how does that cover this situation? Does the employee have a medical condition, and is there another alternative? Could we sit them in an office that's separated from other people so they're not around? Do they still have the opportunity to telework? So again, in looking at the policies and procedures, yes, it's a pandemic. Yes, it's a state of emergency. So the employer has responsibilities and has the ability to have certain requirements. But keep in mind, if an employee says, I can't, as Lyle said, handle these conversations in private and find out if there's a reason that they are not wanting to wear the mask because it's difficult for them to breathe, or maybe they have something and you can provide an accommodation such as continuing to allow them to work from home. So take those things into consideration when your employees start refusing. Find out why first is always helpful.
Get to the bottom of it. Good,
Yes.
good. Our next slide has to do with update on workplace policies. And Leslie's all over that. She's been writing policies for years.
You know, I guess I don't know what type of person I am when I say I enjoy policies and putting policies together, but I think people function better when they see the rules in place and they know what they're supposed to do. But I think that that's something that's very important is when we start changing the landscape of the workplace, what policies and procedures are going to help guide those changes that we're making in the workplace. So one of the things that Lyle said is when we start talking about personal protective equipment, what is the responsibility for those masks? If a person says, I would rather bring my own mask, what is the format for that of what material does it need to be? How many do they need to have in their locker? Other things you have to consider when we start going down this path is we talked about temperatures and taking temperatures in the workplace. Think about from the standpoint of who's going to be responsible for that. How's it going to be recorded? How long of a line? If you have 50 employees that report at 8 a.m., how are you going to track that time while they're all standing in line? How are you going to separate that line by 6 feet between every employee? You could have a very long line if everybody's expected to be there. So maybe you're going to have to consider staggering the times of work. And then also always take into consideration, if you're a union environment, what does the union contract say on some of these matters and these issues? So one of the things I think we have to be very careful of is not to just jump out of the gate and say we're going to take a temperature, but what are the guidelines around how we're going to be taking temperatures and how are we going to protect that information for our employees? The other thing is you said when someone does test positive, do we have the right to tell other employees? How many days are we going to expect them to be out of the workplace? If your employer is able to use the Families First coronavirus and the emergency sick leave and the family medical leave and some of those benefits for childcare, making sure employees understand that this is what this leave is for, here's how it will apply to your timesheet and so forth. But I think policies are very, very important to put in place and be clear in that communication so that employees are aware. And then also, too, the other side of that, you have the documentation to say, yes, we did everything we could to provide the security and the safety for the employees. Here's the steps that we chose to keep safe and how we inform them.
Definitely. You know, one of the things, Leslie, that I found interesting is the collaboration amongst people from different departments, at least with my clients. One of the organizations is having a survey the night before people return to work, answering some questions, and depending on how it answers, it tells them to, you know, contact HR or don't report for work tomorrow or come in at a different time. And we've had to rapidly roll out training on, you know, what data is considered private information, how to handle it, what to do with it. So that's another one that I've seen kind of parallel, and we've worked a lot with HR teams to figure out how do we get this information, secure it, make it private, and then keep it for whatever sort of compliance duration we have to do. It's really, I probably work with more HR people in the last month and a half than anyone. So I can see rapidly rolling out these policies being a really big deal.
Cool. I've just two quickies on here. I'm supposed to talk about travel policy. You're going to have to think about your travel policy. First of all, no non-essential travel right now, but you got to think about that and how you're going to work that out. So that's just something to start planning for. And staff lounges, policies on that.
Mm-hmm.
Have you been to Costco? You have to expand. They've expanded the size of them because you can't put people as close together. And so at Costco, they've taken up half the public eating area, you know, and blocked it off with black plastic. It's kind of funny. But we're all going to have to think about that. How do we reposition our businesses and, you know, our desks and all that kind of stuff? I think we're going to maybe hit some of that on the last slide. But that you know, making it safe, a place to work is going to be really important. Let's go to the last slide and kind of wrap up here. Leslie, though, did you want to say something about PTO? And
Yes, I think it's important to keep in mind when we talk about policies to talk about PTO. That's been a huge question that has come up in regards to where you can't go on a vacation. Well, the first thing I would say is when we provide PTO, we don't promise the employees that with that comes the opportunity to go on vacation. We just said that they could have days off without pay. So, or days off with pay. So I think that's important is how are you going to handle that? Are you going to allow employees to roll over their vacation to the next year? Do you have the ability to pay them out for unused vacation? But I think what you have to think in terms of when you start going through these processes is what's in the employee's mind. In management's mind, it's keeping the doors of the business open. It's generating a profit. It's serving a customer. In the employee's mind, it's a lot of, am I going to be safe? What's happened to my 401k? Am I going to get my vacation time?
Right.
What about my pay? So thinking through from the perspective of the employee and look at those policies. Maybe now you'll have to establish some periods where vacation time isn't allowed for a few weeks. Do you have the right as the employer to modify some of that? Sure. But again, you have to go back and look at what does your handbook say? What does the union contract say? And what financially do you have the ability to do when it comes to rolling over vacation or paying it out? And how you go about handling that as a policy that's come up a lot in my workplace, how we're going to deal with that PTO.
All right. And how about, okay, rebuilding the team connection. What about the team connection? And just some fun things here. It is a stressful time. So you got to keep thinking about how do you keep them sane at home, you know? Somebody wrote into, I've got a small office and I don't want to bring them all into the office. Can I do them? You don't have to treat everybody the same. So if you've got a small office, you don't want to bring them in and have a big group there, spread those days out. Couple some days, couple another day, you know? If that works, figure out who's essential and who's not. One of the crazy things we do is in my office, you know, we've got a dozen people. And so we had a virtual pizza party last week. I called them on Wednesday. It was on Thursday afternoon. And we asked them all what their favorite pizza was. You know, Papa John's will deliver everywhere. So somebody got a pizza in Mount Sterling and a couple of people in Jessamine County and one person in Louisville. Not a problem. They had pizzas and we all sat around and had our, you know, kind of a goof off hour on the phone eating pizza. So it's just kind of a fun thing to do. Think of ways to help people unwind and relax, you know. And remember, you're making an impression on the families of these employees. So that's an important thing to do, to let them know that we care about their, you know, their whole family. So we didn't send small or medium pizzas. We sent large pizzas. So the kids could have some too. So just an idea. Other people are doing crazy things like that. I think it's important. We got to keep expanding our technology. Make sure you've got good systems, training people on it. And all of that helps build your team so they're not so frustrated. There's a lot of systems besides Zoom out there, and Skype and Microsoft Teams, and but they all have their pluses and minuses. Some of them you can only see 4 people at a time. Others you can see a whole bunch of people. And if you're doing a group thing for fun, that's a good idea to let them all see each other. So anyway.
Lyle, what kind of panic do you think if I turned on the ability for everybody's camera to automatically come on right now? You think there would be a little bit of panic on this call?
How many fingers? Okay.
I think this would be our first and last webinar, Bill.
It may be, but it would go out with a bang.
That's right.
We probably better hold off for that.
Lyle, I think that
just ran away.
That's right. Lyle, I think what you just said kind of leads to one of the other questions that we had pre-populated, and then we can go ahead and shift into some other questions. But you're talking about, you know, trying to kind of keep the employees' mental health and team environment in place. Are you finding any of your employers expanding their mental health services or their EAP programs to kind of assist people that might be struggling even financially or just emotionally without having connection with people? What can you share with that?
Absolutely. Yeah, one of our large employers in the community called early on and said, what's the best mental health program around? You know, that people can, see, not everybody's qualified. There's special certification for these counselors to be able to do video counseling. Right. And so actually I have an employee whose wife had to get her whole office certified within the first week. And so that's what, you know, if they don't have that, that's not good for us. We need people that can do this over the phone. Now, I don't know what a week's training is worth, but anyway, absolutely companies are doing that right now. And they're trying to think about, you know, how do I provide this support? Because you try to manage the 2 kids at home that need help, and they're, you know, teaching them to use a computer, and they want to use my computer, you know.
Right.
There are a lot of challenges. So good point. Good question.
We if we've hit the highlights there, are you all ready to jump into some of the Q&A from our attendees? We've got about 76, 77 people online right now, and maybe 10 or 15 questions, some very quick, and some that might be worthy of some good discussion.
I'm game.
I had one more thing toward the rebuilding the teams and the management and so forth, if I can.
Yeah,
sure.
One of the things that I'm getting a lot of questions on is, you know, when we start going and bringing people back to the workplace. I've had managers say that my team, as Lyle said in the beginning, is far more productive from working at home because there's less distractions. But I've also had managers say, I have some employees that I believe would not have the discipline or the motivation to work from home. They need to be in an office environment. Mm-hmm. I think it's very important to have those telecommuting policies in place. If your company is similar to mine, probably a lot of companies started sending employees home without putting parameters around the technology. Was it secure? Were they going to have documents? Did they have a shredder? How was workers' compensation going to apply to working from home? So I think if you've sent employees home without a policy in place, I think it's very important to put a policy and get it out there to them so they understand what those expectations are. And the other side of that, I've worked with a lot of managers who've been very hesitant to feel that they can coach or even discipline an employee during this time. You can still have expectations for your employees, and you need to hold them accountable to those expectations. Exactly, it's a very difficult and it's a very trying time for folks. We provided, and we've always had an EAP program available to our employees. We paid for the aspect to have it virtually available to them to speak to someone. So I encourage that, but at the same time, as a manager, you still, through that communication, can enforce the expectations that you have for employees that you're going to. Thanks.
Yeah. All right, so some Q&A that's come in, a few through our Q&A thing and a few through the chat out to all the panelists. But the very first one that came in, it says, would you please address the way employers should handle employees who are just not cooperating due to the fear or the unemployment benefits exceed their hourly wage? Employers are facing a true challenge getting employees to simply come back. So what are your thoughts on that one?
Well, if I may, one of the things that OSHA states is, when it comes to that refusal to work, OSHA states that for an employee to refuse to work, there has to be a high risk of imminent death. So if we're doing everything that we can to protect employees, there are some employees that are going to say, I'm scared. One of the things, we've had some businesses that have to stay open. When you're talking a nursing home, when you're talking a call center, when you're talking banks, there are some things that have to stay open. Yes, someone could file for unemployment. That doesn't allow the person to walk off the job. So we have contested some unemployment claims because employees, there's a job available for them. It was an essential job. We were taking all the precautions, doing everything we could for them. They left at lunch and didn't come back again. Should you put that and speak truthful on that unemployment claim? Yes. If the employee says, I can't work because there's no one to take care of my 4-year-old, that's going to be a legitimate reason. And in some cases, they may make more. It may be more lucrative for them to be on unemployment. But it doesn't give the employee the right to walk away from a job if one is available for them. And you've done everything you can to take the necessary precautions to keep them safe while they're at the workplace.
Yeah.
What do you want to add anything, Lyle, to that?
No, good answer. I mean, the fact is the law was set up so that if you go off, you get the big unemployment, but when your job is available, you're not supposed to get unemployment anymore. There are some exceptions to that, but that's the basic rule. And the problem is that the unemployment organization is so far behind that you can tell them that and they'll probably keep paying them for 3 weeks, not because they haven't really got, so that's a problem. But we're working on it and they're just overwhelmed.
So here's another one. It says, I have a small business. There are 7 of us. My team came up with their own policy, but I'm worried about privacy and they are not. We have a chart. We set up a chart and everyone writes down their temperature. Is this a bad idea?
I'm writing her a response right now because I really like that person. And I think that, it's not that I didn't like other people, but I looked down and saw her name and I thought, just like her to have such a great team. Okay, what a great thing that your team cares about each other enough that you'd all be willing to share that. So my thought about it is, I don't think it's illegal. If you're making that, if you're mandating people do that, that wouldn't be good, okay? But if they've decided to do that and they know it's voluntary, and you ought to make it clear to them, you don't want to have to defend that practice. But if they're all willing to do it, that's great. You can do it. And that's this team holding each other accountable for good behavior. That's really valuable right now.
Yeah, I would second that. And just as a person who goes in, it is the camaraderie and the we're all in this together thing. Forgive me for, paraphrasing our governor. We've got a couple of other items that are in here that are interesting. It says, are employers subjected to new types of lawsuits from employees if the employee doesn't think they were protected? And will this begin to extend to other contagious diseases like the flu? Now, I know, Leslie, that you and Lyle, as far as I know, you're not attorneys, and I know we're probably going to have an attorney or two on one of these sessions. But from an HR perspective and compliance and things like that, what are your thoughts about this area and the potential lawsuits with things like this?
Well, one thing we talked about is we've changed the landscape of the workplace. If you have a company that's very traditional in nature, people need to be in the office. It's open from 8 to 5 and people come in and sit at a desk. And for a perfect example is maybe when someone has requested an accommodation to work from home or to adjust their hours, you've stated this, we're not a company that can accommodate working from home. Well, probably a lot of us have just proved that point wrong. So in moving forward, it's taking on a different approach. to how we're going to handle disability claims.
Mhm.
Another one that's, I think, a very good point is I was talking to a manager who printed off a roster of the age of all the employees and decided if they're this age and above, we're moving them. One of the employees who was 65 said, I don't want to move. I think we have to be very careful in how we approach these things, from Americans with Disabilities Act, age discrimination in the workplace, OSHA safety. We're going to really have to have our policies and procedures in place. And how we approach these things, to say to someone, based on information you've provided us, we consider you to be someone who would be at high risk. We would like to have you work on this area or this desk where you have more distance between you and the customer. If the employee says, no, I don't think so, I would rather sit in the front desk and do what I've always done, then you have to understand some of those things. But again, it goes back to the communication. There has to be clear and open communication, or you can set yourself up for potential lawsuits for being negligent as an employer and taking care of your employees, or how you chose to handle some of the procedures that you put into place. And I'm not an attorney, but as 25 years I've learned, and in some cases the hard way. So really think through, rely on legitimate sources of information. The SHRM site, go to classes and trainings. If you have access to a corporate attorney, run your policies by someone and get their stamp of approval before you roll them out, if that's something you have available to you.
So Lyle, you got a thank you for that personal answer because you knew that person. We have someone who's offering to help us make pecan pie as well. So if I turned that video on, we'd see that. We also,
I want the address.
Well, and I want to ask why, based on what week this is and what event isn't going to happen, I'm curious why it isn't another type of pie that you normally have this time of year. The other thing, this is the last question that came in. It says, if the new norm becomes, more people work from home, what are the new liabilities? We've touched on that a bit, but this is an interesting one. Are businesses prepared for new types of employee reimbursement requests in order for them to conduct business at home? So is that going to happen? And then if an injury occurs, this is kind of a second follow-on question, how is workers' comp going to be handled for things like that, which Leslie, I think you just touched on, but I am curious about these employee reimbursements and the,
this cannot be answered in a hurry, but yes, in fact, you're suggesting that anybody that's working at home, you really should have an agreement with them. Because guess what? If they get up and fall down the steps while they're working, you could be responsible for that. So there are some real challenges with it, but there are a lot of us that are thinking through it. What do you do to help, protect yourself and protect your employee at home? If they're getting carpal tunnel because they don't have the right chair and desk and all that, that's a problem for us, for you, and for workers' comp. And there's so much. We're running out of time here. I don't know if I'm not supposed to do this, but I'm going to say it anyway. That at my company, we've been doing these things for the past 6 weeks. We're doing it every Monday at 11 o'clock, and we have 2 hours for it. And because you can't cover all this in this short of time, but anybody that wants to sign up for that, it's free. You can just go to our website, hannaresourcegroup.com or hannaresource.com, and sign up for it. And we'll just follow on some of this stuff, because boy, there's a lot of detail here. And I have an attorney on that call every week that helps kind of add to some of the validity of some of our answers. So
and before I hand it over to Debbie to wrap things up, everyone who is one of our attendees today will be presented with a survey after the fact, where if you do have additional questions that you want to ask, if you've got an idea for some people who want to join us, there are fields on there, because we want to get your feedback. And then also, if you do have other questions, just mark in there. If you'd like to get those answered, we'll get Lyle and Leslie to get some answers out and post them online for you.
Great. Hey, a lot of fun and
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, we really appreciate it, everybody. Bill, thank you so much for all the technical assistance and the moderating of the questions, and Leslie and Lyle for your expertise. I know this was a short period of time. Lyle, you're right. So many of these questions are just the tip of the iceberg, but the goal is to get people thinking and to also just let people know that we're here as a resource. So in terms of follow-up, just a few housekeeping items. As Bill mentioned, you'll be receiving a survey. Additionally, we will also house the recording of this webinar and a few additional handouts that coincide with this on the Commerce Lexington website. So watch for them. They have a COVID-19 resource page. So watch for that to be up, I would say tomorrow or no later than Friday. And we also wanted to give you a preview of some future topic areas that we're going to be discussing. We plan to have a legal track to talk about exactly what Lyle just mentioned, liability issues, and kind of, you know, the new legal do's and don'ts for customers, clients, and employees. We then plan to have representatives from insurance, both from a business insurance perspective and a health insurance perspective, to see any nuances or changes within those industries. We also plan to have financial planning. We know that this is not the right time to cash out the 401k, but we also know that there are going to be people who have been affected financially. And so what can we do to help them maximize? And maybe are there some, I know there's some new more lenient borrowing rules against 401ks, et cetera. So we want to make sure the financial planning folks have a chance to share as well. And then last but not least, to round out May, we will be focusing with a couple of different organizations on mental health. And, you know, as we transition and we go back to work, and we've all been in a little bit of a slowdown, what is that going to look like for mental health when we're back to 110% and firing on all cylinders again? So I think there's a slowdown and then there's the ramp up. So we want to take care of ourselves. But I wanted to thank you all again so very much. We were thrilled to have over 100 people enroll and keep about 75 to 100 folks on the call today. So thank you. We hope it's been helpful. If you fill out that survey, you'll have a chance to suggest future topics, and we hope everybody has a wonderful evening.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Hey, Bill, thanks, thanks.
You're welcome, sir. Have a good evening.
Nice job. I hope it met your expectations. You ran a little long, but there's just so much they need.
Lyle, you're still live too.
Good. All right.
I love it.
I thought you were the only one on there, but
oh no, we're showing the closing items so everybody sees the survey link and also some of the other things. So if you want, just give me a ring here in a few minutes.
Okay, cool. I want to ask you how to do something on here.
Okay, perfect. I'll talk to you then.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.